Fox News alert millions of American families.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm George Thomas. We begin with the latest.
Here in St. John's Hospital, there are certainly a lot of efforts here at the LAPD and all across the
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm George Thomas. We begin with the latest in the coronavirus pandemic. Number of cases here in the U.S.
Rise to Liberty podcast, the best podcast you've never heard of, fighting for free speech and spreading the message of liberty. Find us at risetoliberty.com for everything related to the show, including our merch, social media, episode player, and much more. Today we have a very special guest on the show. Sergei of USHANKA Show is a very wonderful YouTube channel highlighting the good, the bad, the ugly, all sides of life in and under Soviet rule. How you doing today, Sergei?
Good. How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty good. Early. So
good. Yeah. Nice to be on your podcast. It's Michigan is on Eastern time, so we got already 10 o'clock, so we're good to go. Waiting for big snowstorm coming, rolling in tonight and tomorrow. So
how's the weather been over there?
Well, we finally got some real winter in January. December was really warm, but I still like winter. Still, I guess, young enough, so I enjoy winter.
So let's jump into it.
Sure.
So you were born in Ukraine in the 70s, correct?
Right. I was born in 1971 in July in Kiev, Ukraine, capital of Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. So I was born about 2 months before Nikita Khrushchev passed away. So he died, I believe, in September of 1971. I think it was September 11th, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Yep, 1971. So yes, I basically lived for 20 years in the Soviet Union. So I was 20 when the Soviet Union collapsed back in end of 1991. And then it became interesting after that. So.
And then the first time you had come to the United States was 1995, right?
That's correct. So yeah, Ukraine became independent, borders opened up. So there was exchange program that you could participate if you have a good English. So I came and I to Michigan to work on exchange program in a summer camp. Yeah, actually. That's what I describe in my book, American Diaries 1995. So that's me back in those days. Look a little bit younger, but a little bit meaner, of course, wearing Adidas as I'm supposed to.
So how was life in general under Soviets? This is really what his channel is about, so make sure to go check out for more detail. But yeah, what was life really like under?
Right. Well, you never think about it when you live there. So, most of my time there was a kid. So I was really happy with my childhood. We have this kind of like a standard phrase said, "Счастливое советское детство," so happy Soviet childhood. So when you're little, you don't really realize, what's going on. You just enjoy, and my parents did a good job making my life as comfortable as they could. And now, since I live in America for about the same amount of time, 20 years, I look back, and if you ever visited zoo, you go to the lion's cage, and you could see little cubs. They play and they have fun. That's the adults that look gloomy and sad. They just lay there because they know they trapped. They're in a cage. While little ones, they don't understand that. So I think a lot of my upbringing as a kid, I didn't know any better. So I have no bad memories about my childhood. It felt safe. I was, as probably most kids in the Soviet Union, so-called latchkey kid, I think it's the expression, right? So we wore our keys on our necks on the rope because everyone by law was required to work. You weren't allowed to be unemployed. So that's a nice way of fighting unemployment. You just make it illegal. So if you don't work for more than 3 months without valid reason, like you're sick, or taking care of some sick relative, you can be called a parasite of society, and that will make you you go to jail or you go find some work. So everyone had to work. So kids come from school around 2-3 p.m. then lock their own apartment buildings. I lived in Kiev, so it's apartment building, and get your own food, and then you do homework or you go play outside. So that's how my childhood went. And I said I felt safe. There was no like stories about kids being taken away off the streets in unmarked white vans, anything like that. So childhood was great in that respect. It's when you get older, then you start kind of bumping your head in this outer cage, and then it's you getting annoyed and stuff like that.
That's really interesting. I've learned quite a bit from your show, and one thing I thought was pretty interesting is you were talking about grocery shopping. You have several videos about the food over there, and the grocery shopping, and how the food was great quality, but there just wasn't enough of it to go around.
Right. What's interesting, I wouldn't even call it grocery shopping. In my understanding, my language, English is my second language. Shopping is when you go and you don't know what you want to buy. So you shop. You just like, oh, that looks good, or that sounds good. I'll try this. So this is in my mind is shopping. In Soviet Union, we were buying food. You go in like, oh, they have a salami today. I'm buying it, or they had some Swiss cheese. So I'll grab some of that. So I don't remember anyone in Soviet Union making grocery lists. It's just like unheard of. My mother was going to the grocery stores pretty much in a daily, it's like a daily thing. On the way from work, she would stop at different grocery stores to see what they have. Maybe they have, some condensed milk that you want to have for the later cooking, or hopefully they have something else. So that's like, it's a permanent looking for buy food. And in Kiev was supplied actually pretty well comparing with like smaller towns and villages. So we didn't have like shortage of main items, but they're always so-called deficit that you can't just find in the store every day.
So what was your first impressions coming to the United States?
Well, it was like kind of exploring like a different planet. Of course, when we went, I actually specifically went like to do a exploration of American supermarket. I mean, we're talking already 90s, so the Soviet Union was gone, and we started getting more stuff in our stores. But still, like I remember, I had a giggles when I saw individually packed garlic heads. Like cute little box where the garlic head is inside. I was like, this Americans are crazy. Like, most of our items when you go to buy in back home, you go to the vegetables and fruit store. That was called vegetables and fruits, and it's just big boxes, and that says big box full of potatoes. And you tell lady, do you like to buy 2 kilograms, or you like to buy so many heads of garlic? So everything was unpacked, and they just give it to you and then wrap in newspaper, or if you bring your own bag. So to see all this individually packed items, especially like make it all looking cute, it was really bizarre. And of course, well, back then I came in 95, so I was an engineer back home, and my salary was equal to like $20 a month. So seeing grocery prices in America, I was shocked. Everything looked so expensive. Jeans, shoes, everything like that. Electronics was super cheap here, like twice cheaper, but food was way more expensive. So that was definitely a learning curve about abundance, and I could understand why they need like 5 kinds of salt. I have a ice cream salt and kosher salt and some other crate. I was like, what the heck? Like, it's salt. It should be just one kind, or we never had brown sugar, powdered sugar, just sugar.
Yeah.
So that's kind of was a different experience, definitely.
So living in Ukraine, in the time period you had actually lived during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
Yep.
How did that affect not only the country but where you were?
Well, Kiev was actually affected pretty badly. It's not right away. We got lucky initially because winds were going north, so south wind. So it was blowing away from us. So that's why Belarus got affected like really bad, but mostly rural areas. Then it turned around. So Chernobyl explosion happened on April 26th. Around like May, early May, like April, maybe 31st. I think it was 31 days in April, if I remember correctly, maybe 30. So anyway, around May 1st, it's when the wind turned around and started blowing radioactive contamination our way. And of course, our media was really sketchy about it. And I mentioned when I was talking about HBO Chernobyl show that they missed big time on the part when explosion happened and government didn't know what to say. So of course all the mass media belongs to the government. They can't say a word without people from above telling them what to say. So they just play classical music. Like you turn radio on, and instead of news or some entertainment program, you have just Tchaikovsky, or something like that. So that was people learned from prior experiences. If there's a classical music in the middle of the day, instead of news, there's something really bad happen. And I was 15 at that time. So we just went through this interesting era in the Soviet Union when we had a leader after leader dying like a flies. You have a Brezhnev passed away less than a year, then Andropov, and then we had Chernenko. And same thing that could happen when leader dies, before they prep an official statements, they'll be playing classical music on the radio and showing like a ballet or something like that on TV. So people kind of learn from there. So if the radio plays classical music, it's probably our leader died again, because it was one after another. And the day when I started playing classical music after Chernobyl explosion, my first thought was, oh my God, I can't believe Gorbachev died. He was so young, so that was my first thought. And then of course we had rumors started circulating in Kiev that something bad happened in Chernobyl. Then my dad said that every driver from their factory was volunteered to help with evacuation. So we had the rumors and everything going on way before government officially acknowledged there is something happened at Chernobyl. So yeah, I actually played soccer outside on the worst day possible when it was a fallout in the Kiev era that radiation levels spiked. I was playing soccer outdoors. So yeah, that was definitely there was a huge disappointment looking back on the reaction of the government. You think when the government saw vertical, chain of command, everyone, that should be like army, right? Let's do it. And they were just all confused and scared. And we learned the truth from the enemy voices. I made videos about that too. So we had Radio Free Europe, Voice of America. So you could catch those radio stations on the shortwave, and they were telling hey, stay indoors, have your windows closed, don't consume any fresh goods, no milk, no fresh milk, no cucumbers, don't touch anything fresh, stay indoors. And was there's something really bad going on, but our government didn't say anything. It's enemy voices from abroad was telling us what to do. So that was crazy times.
So I've talked to a few different people, just casually having conversations, and history is one of the big topics that come up a lot. And I've heard the opinion before from some people that the disaster at Chernobyl was really what sent the fall of the Soviet Union into what it ended up being, the collapse of the Iron Curtain is what we had called it over here at stateside. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I would say it was. I wouldn't say it was a major reason, but it definitely didn't help. I mean, there was a combination of a lot of factors. You know, in the end of the Soviet life, I think if the oil prices would stay low, you know, you had 1979 oil crisis, which sent oil prices to the roof, and Soviet Union was like flushed with billions of dollars, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of Soviet people kind of miss Brezhnev days, because that's when life got better. They started actually importing like foreign goods, so we had a little bit selection here and there. Some, you know, shoes from Finland, some toothpaste, even I remember from England came. So, and the food supply got better. So, if the oil prices would stay low, Soviet Union probably would collapse earlier, because during Andropov, you could tell like he really tried to tighten the screws, so the system already was wobbly. So you can't say it was doing great, and then Chernobyl just kind of like, you know, like a train hit it from no one saw it coming. Economy was not doing great, and like, you know, we were running. I'm a really cynical person, kind of, I guess. So the way I see, you know, the people, the only way you can make people work hard is, or made them fear, or made them being greedy. You know, people like capitalism. You know, you want a nicer house, you want a nicer car, you want younger, prettier wife. So you work hard, you make money. You know, you just work that way because you want to have a better lifestyle. So that's greed, right? And that's what's going on in the United States.
It can be.
Right. Stalin, he realized that fact, and he's like, well, I'm not paying you because we're in socialism. So you'll go to Gulag, a labor camp, or you work at the collective farm for free. So it's your choice. So people were working out of, because of that. I couldn't say they work really hard, but, you know, it's like during the slavery, I read some books about slavery. So there's the level that slaves will figure out that they can work just hard enough to keep owner somewhat happy and not get like punished for it. So there's always this kind of level. They don't work to the max because they know they're going to work themselves to death. And of course, they know if they will completely ignore orders, then will get punished. So that's what happened in the Soviet Union. People found that nice middle that they just work half-assed. I don't know if I can say that. And you know, just to get by, because they'll get paid regardless. If you assemble 10 bicycles a day or 5 or none, you still get paid the same. So eventually, and as I think it's a sports term in America, to play up or play down.
Yeah.
So if you work hard and you're getting paid 150 rubles, and a guy next to you doesn't work or barely works, gets paid the same, your productivity initially will start going down, because like, why am I busting my butt if the guy next to me? So productivity was low. Of course, the Soviet Union spent huge amount of money on military competing with the United States. So that was a lot of factors. So definitely Chernobyl didn't help, but I don't think it was a major factor. You need to remember also Afghanistan debacle. There was huge amount. I don't know. It's probably comparable expense-wise to Chernobyl disaster. Amount of money spent on Afghanistan, because we were there from 1979 till 1987, I believe. So about the same time as United States. I mean, same result. So thousands of lives lost, and we just pulled out. And our government that stayed there, I mean, they hold it for 3 years. So that's the only kind of difference between American pullout and Soviet pullout. Our guy remained in power, till the Russia stopped providing money and weapons, and then they pulled it down. So there were several factors. I don't think Chernobyl was the major one, but it definitely didn't help.
Yeah. So how does Russians, and I'm sure you're more familiar with the Ukrainians at this point, how does that part of the world feel in general about where they are now, so after Soviets?
Well, it's, when I was back in Kiev, probably close to half of my friends were Russians. Like Kiev was quite a mixture, and because of the so-called Russification, like you could hardly find a Ukrainian school in the capital of Ukraine. Like I was taught all the subjects in Russian, my first language. So I'm a perfect product of the Soviet system. I'm a Soviet Ukrainian. So I'm by nationality, I'm Ukrainian. Mentally, I was always Soviet. Like when we were watching a hockey game, and Canadian commentator, American commentator, say, "Oh, those Russians, they." I was like, "We're not Russians. Those are Soviet hockey players. Like, stop saying Russian players." So, of course, a lot of Russians, they have this imperial kind of mentality. So for them, it's a huge tragedy, because Soviet Union was like something to be like, you respect the country, it's the second powerful country in the world, and this and that, and suddenly it just kind of collapsed into nobody. And so a lot of Russians they feel down, because it's just like, yeah, when the Soviet Union was there, everyone was scared of us. Now, so now they're happy with Putin because he kind of brought Russia back to the level that neighbors are afraid of you. I mean, because that's the mentality. Like, do you think the people afraid of you, they like you? Not really, So, and of course, there's a lot of craziness going on. Like, there's a lot of people that just so nostalgic about Soviet days, and I think it's a lot of reasons why. One of them, I think, is just our memory is set that way that you forget all the bad stuff. You kind of keep the memories of the good stuff. So, I won't remember that crappy day, was rain coming down when I was walking towards my girlfriend's apartment, but I'll remember what happened in her apartment. So, like, oh yeah, that was good times, but, it was all soaking wet and cold, but it doesn't matter. I don't remember that. I remember, when she kissed me and everything was great. So a lot of people have this remnants of this selective memories, like, oh yeah, this was great, but I don't remember staying in line to buy, shoes for 2 hours, something like that. They forgot a lot of those things. So it's quite interesting. Like, I follow a lot of Russian social media, and it just cracks me up, because there's just like arguments and like people scream at each other, and some it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. We call that looking at the past with rose-colored glasses.
Pretty much, yeah. I have a good example. Like, when I was a kid, I truly enjoyed mushroom hunting in the village, in the woods. In northern Ukraine, where I went to, the village is like in northern Michigan, like 45th parallel. So we have a lot of pine trees, so birch trees, and we have a lot of mushrooms. I don't know why they don't have them in Michigan that much. So that was a great time. So I was telling my kids all the stories, how great it was, hunting through the trees, finding the little mushrooms. Then I brought my son, and I was like all excited to show him. We go in the woods, and we walk both into the spider webs. And it's like, oh, you know what, kid? I forgot about this part. We need to grab sticks and need to walk in front of you, move the sticks all the time to knock down the spider webs. So I forgot the part about spiders at all. I remember just how fun it was to find a mushroom. Then, of course, mosquitoes went after us. Like, oh, I forgot this part too. We need to bring bug spray next time. So this is just, I don't know, your brain plays tricks with you, just leaves the good memories and kind of files away the bad ones. So that was like shock for me, that how can I forget there's a spider webs all over the place? And I don't remember at all till I walk into one, 20 years later.
Yeah. So there's one question I know my listeners will want to know is, do you see any parallels between what's going on now in the United States and how Soviets treated their citizens and how they ruled their citizens? Do you see any parallels today?
Yes and no. I really not happy when people start calling like Democrats socialists. I think it's such a simplification, that it hurts my just inner being, because like in the era of internet, it's so easy. You just Google what is socialism and read about it a little bit. And there's nothing socialist about what Democrats do. It's just this convenient kind of sticker to slap. I don't like you, you're socialist. You know, there's the basic rules what is socialism. You know, it's like if I tell you, hey, you have your vlog, you have your channel, you're a social person. Doesn't mean you're a socialist. No, I'm always was anti-social person. Didn't like to hang out with people. Doesn't make me anti-socialist, you know. So there's a lot of confusion. And I tell people, you need to listen to your politician. And if he will say, I want to nationalize industries, I want to nationalize banks, you know, then you say, okay, there's a socialist right there. There's some social policies that it definitely looks like government creates, for whatever reason, they think that people need to be helped. You know, like, okay, we'll need to give everyone money. The conversation about this, like this basic income, so you just, everyone gets money, no matter if they work or not. And that's kind of the bell that I think it's kind of like sounds scary. When you start paying people for doing nothing, it's just downhill from there, because like, why would I work if this guy doesn't work and gets paid? You know, already talked about it, right? So this is where it starts. So there is some of it, but unfortunately in America, a lot of times, I remember seeing photos, someone was holding a sign back in the 50s, says mixing racism. Mixing races is communism. So once again, it's like, if you don't like when, you know, black people and white people marry, have kids, it's not communism. It's a different situation, but it's convenient way of just calling, you know, people fascist, people on the left, and then on the right they call you communist. Like if you see, I always post these comments that people call me socialist and communist, and then I have far leftists call me that I'm a capitalist pig and all that stuff. So it's interesting, but there is some like government definitely taking more and more things, like acting like people are handicapped and they can't take care of themselves. What the reason for it, I can't tell you, but United States right now definitely not in a good spot. Generally, it's can be scary.
Yeah, it's interesting. My my standpoint is there's a lot of control by the corporations and a lot of control by government. And a friend of mine has kind of been pushing the idea that Mussolini would be very proud of our system right now. And the marrying and meshing of government and corporation. And it's more economic fascism more than anything. And people seem, not everybody, but some people, especially the later Gen X generation and the millennial generation, seem to be calling for a lot more control over corporations and corporations having more control over government and all of these things. And it's really interesting that people aren't calling it out for what it is. It seems pretty scary that either a corporation or a government would have any level of control, even close to the extent that they do in this country. Deciding what information people have access to is one of the scariest things to me, which is actually why I have these conversations. It's a drop in the bucket, of course, but I believe in freedom of speech, and I think that that's incredibly important. People are intelligent by themselves and can hear both sides of the argument and make up their own mind.
Right. Well, that's another part I find annoying. A lot of times, as I said, like we talk about socialism, quick research can tell you what socialism is, that you can just say, yes, this guy is socialist. Because I found a lot, this argument, some people, they'll call, for example, like Biden or Bernie Sanders socialist. then next day they'll be making fun because look how they are millionaires. They live in these, $500,000 homes. What a crappy socialists are. So like you call a guy a socialist, and then and the same next day you call him a bad socialist because he lives like a real capitalist. Yeah, he sold books. He made millions of dollars. He took advantage of the tax breaks that they pushed. So it's definitely iffy, but yeah, I kind of see what it's talking about when the corporations and the government kind of mash up. But the United States have a bank, right, that provides loans so the other countries can buy products of American corporations. So it's like, and then you lower taxes on American corporations while taxpayers' money provide the low interest loans. So there is a craziness going on. But at the same time, like there's also this movement. I hear a lot talking about anti-globalism, right? That globalism is bad for the United States. And I'm always asking, like, if you look at the major global corporations, the all United States of America corporations, all the world smokes Marlboros, world wears Levi's jeans, world drinks Pepsi and Coca-Cola. They eat McDonald's. Like, I think McDonald's makes more profit overseas than they make in the United States. We can check that out. Google it once again. It's like America is the one that started this whole global thing, right? I mean, the world using the United States dollar as the global currency. Like America is the reason why globalism is so prominent, like through every fabric of society, because that's what the United States did. And of course, we can talk about petrodollar, and that every time that any country is trying to sell oil for anything else but United States dollar, there's a U.S. Navy air carriers show up, and they convince the country like you don't do that. So this is like really interesting, the situation when people don't understand that actually America like benefits. I'm not sure like every citizen benefits, but bankers definitely do. From United States applying globalism on the whole globe and supporting this kind of system with its nuclear air carriers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think where people, at least the people that I talk to regularly, get concerned with globalism is the destruction of the nation. There's a lot of pride, a lot of national pride. The big scary word now is nationalism. I don't see any issue wrong with being prideful of where you come from. I think when it's blind and you don't have any criticisms of where you come from, I think it can become dangerous. When it's coupled with other ideas, it's definitely can be dangerous. But having pride in where you come from, I don't think is inherently wrong or nefarious. So
well, as long as you don't think you're better than a person next to you just because you were born in the United States,
yeah,
that's kind of my issue is, like, okay, I'm Ukrainian by nationalities, but I didn't file any paperwork that I would like to be born in Kiev as a male and Ukrainian. So if we had a choice like that, you think like maybe you think the person in Honduras filed the paperwork like, I want to pick like the worst country in the world and I want to be born in the poorest village. It's like it happened that way. So I'm in that respect, like I see pride, but it's like I'm more the person like you need to, like if you went to military service, you served your country, you help community, you pay taxes that you're supposed to pay, not dodging them, and then sure you can be proud of yes, I'm an American. But people who dodge military service, and somehow I see this new trend that most of our presidents in the United States is the all were military service dodgers. Like they for some reason it's like I don't want to say we need to make a law that you need to serve in the military to become a president, but it's like Clinton and Trump and Bush did the National Guard, but they all just care, it's like rich kids just don't want to go to military. And now, of course, they made it easy not to do anything because there's no draft. So this, if your actions do, then sure, you could be proud of it. But just hugging the flag while you dodge the military service, I'm really skeptical. And Biden also, I looked it up, like, hey, he dodged his service too. He was really good in sports in high school, then suddenly he had some issue with his back where it was time to be drafted. And
yeah, he's been a career politician, almost like all of them, and they're all part of one club,
Yeah, what I've realized how old Biden is when I saw a picture of him during his 1979 visit to Soviet Union. Like, he is shaking head with Gromyko, which is, I remember as a tiny kid, I remember that guy on TV. I remember his name, and I was like, oh my God, Biden was already in politics when I was still, playing in a sandbox.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty crazy.
He first got elected into office just right out of law school, and it's
that's
been
true,
in office ever since.
But we got these wild swings we have from person had zero experience in politics and the reality show star, and you can call him successful businessman, and then we go in the completely opposite guy who old as mold and politically, can't find any more professional politic in him, and
yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely, but if you look in the big picture in the world, this is how they always went. You had looking back, Spain was one most powerful country in the world, industrial power, navy power. Then England took over, kicked Spain's ass, right? Then World War II kind of destroyed British Empire and pushed America to be number one, right? So it's like, okay, every 70 years, 100 years, there's a new power rise. And now, we created China, I can't blame anyone but the United States for, providing China with all the technology, all the money, everything to make it a superpower. There's nobody else buys so much Chinese goods than the United States,
Yeah. Yeah, and so, I would argue that a lot of people have been selling our country for in favor of China, making it harder to manufacture goods here, so we end up buying more goods from them.
Right. And this is the major difference between China and Soviet Union, if you think about it. Lenin, a long time ago, said that greedy capitalists, they will sell us the rope that we're going to use to hang them up, to hang them. And that's what happened during the Stalin era. He confiscated grain from peasants, and peasants were starving to death, so-called Goldomor, like in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, sold grain at a discount to the West and used the money to buy American equipment, British equipment. So he was buying the rope. American specialists came to build these factories. We had a lot of tractor factories that were manufacturing tanks. Well, China went a different way. China's like, no, you will teach us how to make the best rope in the world. And that's how, till recently, you couldn't open any business in China if you don't have 50-50 with local corporations, right? So you transfer know-how to China because you're so greedy, you want that Chinese business. And as a result, they really shortcutted this whole process of growing as a, economy because, okay, give us your technology, show us how to build high-speed trains, show us how to build super fast computers, how to build better cars. It's that's what greed does, I guess. There's another, once again, how much you want the government to control that part. Because, when Trump started doing tariffs, okay, this is actually government controlling the flow of capital, flow of goods. So it's complicated. It's not easy answer for all those questions. And I don't have any answers.
Yeah, I think it's definitely difficult. You know, there's two people at play here, two people at fault. We have the politicians who have made the deals that have hurt the country, and yet we have the citizens who voted the people in. Now, who's more responsible?
Right.
I would place a lot of the blame at the feet of the people who continue to vote in people that make bad policy, or policy that favors another country, um, depending on where they come from, what the person is complaining about. Um, I'm actually I'm not left or right. I'm a little bit of both.
Right.
I'm libertarian, so I tend to believe I'm more reasonable than the left or the right. I have lots of conversations about that all the time, and of course, I would love to see a strong nation. I would love to see this strong nation work with other strong nations, though. Um, I'm not an isolationist. I don't believe that we're the only great country. So I do definitely blame a lot of the voting citizenry for continuing to vote in people who sell out the country.
Well, if you look also, you guys here, I mean, I'm an American citizen, but, I still have my Soviet passport from back in the day. So we had one party system. You have it better. You have two party system, but still not good. It needs to be more choice. It should be more powerful third, fourth party. Then they have to compromise. But because right now it's just like, it's bad or ugly. It's
Yeah.
when in 2014, right? Is that when Clinton was against the election?
2015 and 16.
Okay, so I was like, I don't vote. I can't vote for Hillary. It's just no.
Yeah.
So then, like, I look at the option Trump. I was like, okay, I listened to him. I was like, okay, I can't vote for this guy either. I liked his wife, and that was about it. It's just, so I voted third party, but it didn't do much good. So it's just sometimes I just wonder, and it almost looks like this is a great distraction for people. Is just half of the nation beating another half of the nation when those guys and go have a drinks and laugh all the way to the bank taking money. Like everyone.
Yeah, that's exactly how I view things. They play things up in front of the camera. They might say that they're on opposite sides, but behind closed doors, they do business together. Their children go to school together.
It's always about the money, and they only vote 100% when it's to start a new war, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the voting record, and the only times when it's 100% vote or maybe one person against it, they'll be, oh, let's invade another country because democracy there at risk.
Speaking of that, how do you feel about what's going on at in Ukraine right now with the Russians and the United States kind of hyping things up?
Right. Well, the problem started a long time ago. It's just it was never kind of like a focus of the Western media because Russia took over Crimea back in 2014. This is almost 8 years ago, right? But that kind of went on the radar. Like, okay, Crimea was kind of Russian, sure, whatever. Then Putin like, okay, guess it's fine. And now let's see what we can do in Eastern Ukraine. So it just, Russia doesn't understand the kind of this type of language when you try to talk. I don't understand like bullying, right? So, and Russians generally, and that goes way back to the Soviet days, always look at the NATO as the aggressive kind of pack. So it was created to attack Soviet Union. So with that mentality, and of course, Putin is former KGB, And if you look at the, how NATO was growing after the collapse of Soviet Union, it definitely looks like it's slowly creeping up on the Russian bear. So if I'm Russian bear who looks at the NATO as the hunter, definitely Russian bear is not happy. What the NATO has in mind, I don't know, but I understand like Baltic states, they made a hard choice buying a natural gas and oil from Russia at the deep discount or go to the West. And they learned their lesson from 1940 when Soviet Union forced them to accept Soviet troops, and then they had election there, and 100% went for socialist government. So they're like, yeah, we've seen this movie before. We'll pay world market prices for oil, but we would like to join NATO. Ukraine made a different choice, but this is what happened because Ukrainians were keeping electing former communists. Like pretty much every president, Russia made it simple. They just kept Putin since 1999. We had quite a few presidents, but most of them were former communists. So those guys don't know how to create. They just know how to steal. So they just robbed the country blind, and we just were, holding by the thread, using cheap oil and gas from Russia. So Russia, of course, considers like we're obligated, like we supported you for all these years, and now you bastards want to run away and join NATO. I didn't hear anybody official acknowledgement that there's actually something on the table to join NATO, but Russia definitely don't want to allow Ukraine to become NATO member. But once again, that's how you look at the NATO. Like what Russia did to Georgia, now what Russia did to Ukraine, I changed 180 on the NATO thing, because before that I was like, okay, Cold War is over, Warsaw Pact is gone, you probably should disassemble NATO, it's done its purpose, right? But suddenly Russia, once they recovered, they started messing around with, this biggest country in the world, surrounded with these little tiny but really aggressive neighbors. They constantly attack poor Russia, and Russia has to respond. They attacked Georgia in 2008, took a chunk of territory. Moldova, they did even earlier in 90s. Now it's Ukraine's turn. So it just, now it's like, okay, Ukraine will be better off with NATO, but, it's too late. I don't think personally Putin going to attack. Ukraine is too big of the country to swallow, and there's a new generation grow up that they are actually quite nationalist. Like I go sometimes on Reddit, and once again I'm being hated on the Russian Reddit and Ukrainian Reddit because once Russians find out I'm Ukrainian, that's it. It's like you're a neo-Nazi, you're banned. And when the Ukrainians find out I'm a Ukrainian that speaks Russian instead of Ukrainian, banned. So it's that situation when you're in the middle, you're getting hammered from both ends. So that new generation, quite a few of them, they are like, it's not my generation. I'll be like, okay, well, Russia gonna take over, big deal. I don't see a reason to die just because the president will be in Moscow again than in Kiev. I grew up 20 years. I mean, it wasn't great, but didn't get much better, in independent Ukraine because everything got stolen. Some people got filthy rich, and most of the population, barely getting by. So,
yeah, it's really interesting. I read an article yesterday that was stating, it was a politician from Ukraine was publicly made a statement saying that Biden and the politicians over here were hyping things up and making them seem a lot worse in American media to try and play both sides and try and start a conflict that is most likely not going to happen. Announcing that they are sending weapons, constant news coverage through CNN, MSNBC, these things to try and get people all hyped up and concerned of, World War III, bring back the Red Scare. And I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that. And I think due to the economy and a lot of things that the Biden administration has been currently doing and failing at, I think they're looking for the perfect opportunity to be able to start a new war and get the focus off of the homeland and onto another. How do you feel?
It could be a good distraction. I mean, I was back in my so-called Maidan events of 2013 when Seoul started, when they forced the pro-Russian president Yanukovych to flee. There was a huge mess right in Kiev. I had concern that, that Ukraine could be as a worm on a hook for Russia. Like Russia, still could be broken apart, right? Like Yugoslavia, Russia is like the last country that consists of this totally different little regions with total different population, like Dagestan, Chechnya. So there's still can be broken apart. So I had this concern, but I neither can, I don't have any proof that, using Ukraine as the bait to get Russia involved. And then, of course, America comes to help. And in the end, when dust settles, there is no more Russia. It's like long term, it would be kind of nice that Russia will be stopped being superpower somewhat. But, when my own country gets as a bait, I'm not happy about either. It's kind of similar situation like what happened to Afghanistan. I mean, there's some people in the government of the United States were hoping to convince Soviets that, they're going to move in. Like I was told by the Soviet media that we were at like day or two, if we will be day or two late moving into Afghanistan, Americans will come in and install their middle-range nuclear weapons right in Afghanistan, in underbelly of Soviet Union. So that was pretty much race for time. But America never had those plans. But some people were creating this kind of smoke and mirrors effect to convince Russia, like, get in, so we'll do the Russian of Vietnam, which actually happened, right? As long as the Soviet Union moved in Afghanistan, then suddenly America started helping freedom fighters, providing them with stingers, and then went downhill from there. So it could be Ukraine kind of same scenario to get Russia really pissed and actually attempt to occupy. And then, of course, you put sanctions, you collapse economy. And it's
one of those things. Obviously, I'm completely against any nation building. It's not our place.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of war. I'm absolutely against it at all cost. Any military action should only happen in self-defense. You should never strike first, and you should never, in my opinion, I don't think America should be involving itself in other countries' disputes. There's no way that us going into any situation is going to make it any better. If there was if I actually trusted the leaders to say like there is a very credible threat and we need to have a presence in case, that would be a little bit of a different story. Standing up for somebody who might not be able to do it themselves. From what I understand, Ukraine would be pretty capable. Maybe not in the long run, but initially they would be able to hold their own for a while. How do you feel about that?
It's hard to say. I mean, Russia definitely way more powerful country with more advanced technology. They have so many tanks and aircraft. There's like army to army. Definitely, I think Ukraine has no chance. But the only way you can fight those wars is like guerrilla style wars. And if you look at the history, Western Ukraine, it was under like Poland, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Soviet Union took over it only for a short period of time in 1939, 1940, when they split Poland with Germany. Then after war was over in 1945 with Germany, Stalin was for another 11 years. They were trying to get Western Ukraine under total control. So it took them 11 years under Stalin to get those Ukrainian nationalist fighters to finally wipe them out. So there is a history of Ukrainians fighting guerrilla war, but of course, if there will be open fight, you know, I mean, how long did it take for America to take over Afghanistan? What, like a week?
It was, well, I mean, some would argue that we never took over the country.
Right,
And,
but you know,
the
like
whole thing was
technically
a
it was,
disaster.
you know, same as Iraq, and then you have this guerrilla war will drag for years, and the question is how long people of United States or, you know, in Soviet Union, of course, under Stalin, he could afford 20 years of war. He didn't care, you know, people had no word. So the only chance I think Ukraine has is actually not to fight, you know, like classical battle style, because Russia will wipe them out. They just have way more of everything. But guerrilla war, that's the only way to. It's more challenging because our landscape is not that, you know, you need to have mountains and forests. So it would be harder, but that's the only way Ukraine can fight back is actually hide and strike, you know, not the open battle. I mean, look at Finland. I mean, they managed to wear out the Red Army back in 1940. I mean, tiny army, tiny country, and they end up resisting total occupation, although that's what Stalin had in mind.
Same with Poland for the most part until Hitler, you know.
Right.
Well, Poland's had a pretty good history of being able to fight off larger armies historically. Yeah, it's interesting. I try to not consume too much mainstream American media. I really tried to find a balance between other news stations outside the U.S. Seem to be giving a more full picture of what's going on.
Right.
I believe there is a lot of state-ran media in this country pushing a very specific narrative, and when I hear things like you know, Putin's this, Putin's that, or even vice versa. I'm not sure who the president is over in Ukraine right now, but anyone calling the other person, you know, a warmonger, and choose whatever trigger word. I start raising questions and
Right.
like, what's the full story here? Because there's no way CNN can be telling me the truth about what's going on in these countries.
Well, they got really good in pushing talking points, and that's kind of impressive because you can. I mean, I don't watch TV for a long time. You know, I get snippets of news here and there on YouTube, but you could, like, if you flip the channels the old style well, there'll be like there are specific talking points, and that's what can keep on pounding. Same word combination on every channel, just like, okay, this is our talking points for today. Let's you know, drill it into people's mind. You know, that Putin is a killer, and it will be going, you know, till, okay, next one is this. So it's definitely, it's a good idea. Like, I would listen to the Russian, because, you know, I'm fluent in Russian and Ukrainian. I'll listen to Ukrainian YouTubers, to Russian YouTubers. Then I see, you know, try to filter all this nationalist drama and propaganda, see what actually going on. But it's definitely, yeah, in America, they know how to manipulate the public opinion. I mean, they're professionals at it. There's just no doubt about it. That's why it's a good idea. But, you know, with internet, like, you can explore and find other sources of information. It's just what annoys me that a lot of people don't bother.
Yeah, well, I've noticed lots of people like to read headlines, and then that's it. They don't even read the actual articles.
Well, you think about it also, we have, I don't know about other countries, but in America, a lot of people don't want news anymore. They want coverage of the news that matches their emotions. So they want somebody, like, you know, if somebody watching Fox News, a lot of those guys, they're not really news anchors, right? They're just opinion type of person. So they will provide opinion that matches your opinion and just kind of And the same on the left. So they don't want the actual news and think about it. Like, yeah, tell me what you think about those news because I want to be on the same wave with you because that's so they want just to share emotions, not like analyzing actual news. And that's what kind of frustrating because you just talk some people like talking to the wall. They got those talking points. Like you talk different people and they come up with exactly the same thing. I was like, you guys definitely getting somewhere like prepped really well because you repeat exactly the same talking point no matter what. And it's like there's no way you're gonna come up on your own with these numbers, or something like that. You talk to any Russians about Ukraine, they'll bring Nuland and $5 billion in CIA funds. I was like, okay, well, we need to look what is the $5 billion was like given right away. No, it's in 20 years. Okay, so it's 250 million a year. Actually, good idea to look where the money went. If you're telling me that they were planning this coup in Ukraine back in 1994 when Kravchuk was president, like, man, the CIA really looked forward, like, okay, in 20 years, we need to pump this money to get the coup ready. So it's not the truth. So it's something in the middle. You just need to look it up and find out how much who was involved, stuff like that. So, but people don't want, they want simple answers to complicated questions, and that's the main challenge.
Granted, I do believe the CIA has had a large hand in a lot of this. They definitely don't look out for U.S. citizens or any other citizens.
It just could be. I was asking on my YouTube channel because some people said that about $5 billion CIA. But I was like, okay, if you tell me that was doing for 20 years, it's not like they already predicted that in 2014 there'll be a pro-Russian president because we had a pro-Russian president before that, Kuchma. The guy even couldn't speak Ukrainian. Like you have a president of the country that, picture you electing a guy that barely speaks English. His first language is Spanish, That's what happened in Ukraine. Like dude was like literally struggling to say anything in Ukrainian. And we elected him as the president of Ukraine. So we had pro-Russian presidents prior. So it's like, why then wasn't coup then? It just had to be now. It's more they might be involved, but it said it's not like they prepped this whole mess 20 years in advance. So.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, geopolitics, it's really interesting. However, regardless of what happens, all I know is I'm against any new wars.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not in anyone's favor to.
Well, somebody makes good money.
Yes, Raytheon and BlackRock. A lot of these massive corporations.
They just posted their profits collapsed for some reason recently. Oh wait, that's because they stopped Afghanistan war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a new war popping up because they want to make more money all of a sudden, makes a little bit more sense. So
I mean, they got shareholders. They have their responsibilities. It's business as usual. It's McDonald's trying to sell more hamburgers. Raytheon trying to sell more. Whatever they make, missiles or other systems. So yeah, it's
ammunition. Pretty much munitions, ways to annihilate people. So right. in some of the most horrible ways, which if it's self-defense, that's one thing. But when you're the aggressor trying to bolster things up, make things seem more bad than they actually are, I think there's a certain level of responsibility to that. And I really hope American citizens really take a long look at this, that we don't get involved in something that, for one, is none of our business, and for two, could end really badly for everyone involved. So.
Right. But the history shows, like, every time both parties vote 100% together, it's to start a new war. That's what the most concerning part. Like, they, hey, 9/11 happened, let's attack someone. Yep. Looks like Iraq was involved. you know, like how many Iraqi terrorists were on those planes? Like one? The rest was from Saudi Arabia, but we're gonna attack Iraq.
Exactly. And we're not even going to ask questions. We're also going to go to Afghanistan. We're also going to go into Libya. You know, we'll just spread out in that region of the country, which, you know, the U.S. should have learned from what happened to the Soviets in the 80s and late 70s. You know, that any country that goes in to the Middle East is not going to win, and it's you're going to come out with a bunch of bruises, which is exactly what happened. We wasted all that money, lives wasted for no reason, and it's interesting. That's why I vote for third party. You know, at one point in time, I do remember when Democrats used to be anti-war. Whether they voted that way or not, they at least talked about it. Now they don't. I only see third parties talking anti-war.
You know, it's kind of funny. You reminded me. I still remember when Ronald Reagan became a president. I was at 81 maybe. So I was like 10-year-old, and there was Cold War already at that height. So we were told that Jimmy Carter is such a hawk that he just wanted to start, you know, war with Soviet Union, made Cold War into hot war. And there's a hope that Ronald Reagan now got elected, so maybe now there'll be kind of improvement. It will have a peace talks. And actually, I remember being kind of happy that, less scared that now we have Ronald Reagan in America. Maybe something will improve, but definitely didn't go that way. But it's kind of my recollection back in those days that I first remember knowing about American president and hoping to be something anti-war.
So before we wrap up here, what's a couple of stereotypes of your culture that you see here in the United States that just drive you crazy?
What people think about Russian, Soviet Union kind of thing. I mean, there's some just oldies, you know, like all Russians do just drink vodka and ride bears. You know, there's a lot of this kind of, you know, like totally stuff like, hey, did you ever like pay attention? You know, I find it a little bit, I mean, I can't say annoying because I utilize myself, like anytime there's anything about Soviet Union and Russia, they'll make English letters flip to make it look like Russian, you know, like letter R, they'll flip because it's our ya. But I did that to USHANKA show, so I can't really complain. So, you know, I'm become westernized. I think people know more now, but then back then, because the internet opened up and there's a lot of YouTube channels that people can actually see. But can't even think right now that most will be like when I came in '95, no one even knew what Ukraine is. I'm telling people I'm Ukrainian, and they're like, "What is this?" You know. So I end up telling people I'm Russian because I give up explaining what Ukraine is. So that kind of thing was really annoying that people had no clue. You know, they just know that part of the world. It's everyone is Russian. You know.
Yeah. So, couple of things. The stereotypes I always saw growing up was the Adidas. What's up with the Adidas thing?
All right. Yeah, actually, it's true as said. Like even on this picture, I'm all decked out, Adidas T-shirt and Adidas jacket. It's pretty much. It was the only foreign brand that we were familiar with. It's like we never knew about Nike or Pumas, and especially after the Soviet Union government signed the contract, there was actually a decision on the highest level of the Soviet government which company to pick for the Soviet Olympics team to wear, like to be supplier. So that was agreed. Okay, let's do. They couldn't do, of course, American brand because you know Cold War, they're bad guys. So they picked Adidas. So that's how the Adidas kind of came to the Soviet Union. So that was the only cool brand we knew about it. So even if you bring something else, like people had no clue, like what is this Asics or I don't know what else was back in the 80s. We didn't know any other brands. So it's like if you know Gucci is cool, and you know, so then you just bring Gucci. So Adidas was kind of back in the day in the 90s. It was just the only cool thing you can dream of. It's just, I don't know, it was just like almost like your microchip is programmed that way. That's why even I came here, I was like, I need a Adidas t-shirt. It's pretty crazy. Of course, now people discovered all other brands, so it's only like some people like this Gopnik culture that stayed with Adidas that became kind of their signature. But yeah, back in the Soviet days, like it's the only cool brand you knew about it was Adidas. The only thing you could get if you knew people or you're willing to pay, 200 rubles. So you pay more than your monthly salary for a pair of Adidas shoes. So that was the coolest thing you could get.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. So that's why I love your channel, though, is you cover topics like this. You cover the stereotypes. You cover daily life, how things were.
Thanks.
One thing I do want to touch on just before we wrap up was you had made a comment in a video about how it was difficult for you to still imagine how people can so freely criticize their leaders.
Oh yeah, that was nuts. Literally, it's when I came to America in '95. So we already have 4 years, of no more Soviet Union. And how I got introduced to American newspapers, I work at the farm after I finished working the camp. I got a job working the local farm, and one of my responsibility was to pack peaches in the crates. And of course, farmer being a person that doesn't like spend extra money, all his relatives were bringing newspapers, and I was, using newspapers to put on the bottom of the crate. So I started seeing cartoons, and I was really shocked to see political cartoons like Americans making fun of their president. Like I was like, oh my God, somebody did like that in Russia, he'll get arrested next day. It's just we never ever made. I mean, we had a jokes kind of like in the kitchen whispering like, hey, did you hear this? Listen, joke about Brezhnev, but in open to make fun of the leaders. It took me forever to like. I was not like, holy crap, these Americans are crazy. How can it's your leader, And even like when there was that whole Clinton Monica Lewinsky debacle, I think it's around same time, right? 96, 97, I guess.
Yeah.
I was also shocked, like why they allow mass media to do that. Like if somebody will be doing it to Putin like that, and he has some younger girlfriends, there'll be people jumping out of the windows, getting hit by cars and stuff like that. This is not allowed because you need to show respect to your leader. So the fact that Americans can still make fun of their leaders, I mean, that's a good sign. But yeah, I was like, can't believe it. They just made this ugly picture of, Bush or Clinton, and it's just like making him, all his permanent feature even worse. Like, and nothing, they're not gonna do anything about it. This is crazy.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So I had to mention it because that's I know nothing other than
right. In government, it's your servant, right? You elect government to be a servant, to do your bidding. So if you see something they don't do, you don't like, you just make fun of them. And it's totally cool. Now I look at it that way, but before, my gosh, it's just the whole idea that in a big newspaper will be this caricature of the president. It's like, you're nuts.
Yeah, that's just so interesting having that perspective, and I'm sure it still is interesting to you to look back on things and look at your life now.
Back in my day, it wasn't that bad, but back in the Stalin era, we had people who went to labor camps for 10 years because wife wrapped the butterbrot sandwich into newspaper, and it happened to be a grease stain on this portrait of Stalin. The co-worker saw it, reported to NKVD, the Internal Affairs Office, and the guy goes to labor camp in Siberia for 10 years because he showed disrespect to their leaders. So this is what I came from, Wasn't that bad in my days during Brezhnev, but this is how people could get punished for showing disrespect, even by accident. I'm not talking You want to watch out. If you use newspaper in an outhouse, you make sure there's no portrait of your leader, because you can get in serious trouble too.
Yeah, I think it's kind of scary how there's still some regimes out there like that, such as like North Korea.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
Any level of disrespect and you disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well,
And you're,
this is what happens. Like, I consider, if you elect someone, it's like you let the goat in your garden with a lot of cabbage, and if goat stays there for too long, he started considering it's his cabbage, right? It's cabbage. Like Putin, like they kept him since 1999. So now the guy's like running the country like it's my garden. I do whatever I want. It's like they don't care that there's old people barely surviving on their pensions, but we're gonna design this super duper supersonic nuclear missile that can fly for 5 days before they hits Florida. So this is what happens when you don't have a proper way of changing government on a regular basis and let people, we talked about election in America, but still it's better than Putin like, okay, we need to change our constitution just a little bit because I would like to stay as the president for another 4 or 5 times, since 1999. Like, it's insane. This whole generation grew up under one leader. We're back to the Soviet days when, once you get a top power, you're going to die at the helm. You don't give up. It's really sad.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's specifically with Putin, him being a former KGB agent, which I think is kind of interesting. I had actually seen a picture of Putin back with Ronald Reagan when he had first come to Russia, and Putin was there dressed as just a tourist visiting Moscow. And I thought it was really interesting because you saw him in the background, and it's very clearly him. Yeah, it's really interesting. You had the world leaders there, but you also had some tourist in the background that just happened to be Putin. So, it's kind of interesting. And the fact that he stayed in for so long is, I know people like him.
It's a lot of people like strong leaders. That's just, I remember watching one YouTube video on Russian, and it was like, these people live in a village and there's no like real good roads, so they have to be on a trailer pulled by the big tractor because the regular vehicle can't make it. So they go through this horrible mud and holes while a guy talking to local teacher, and he's discussing, he's really concerned about events in Syria. Like, dude, did you see what road you on? Why are you so concerned that Russia needs to protect something in Syria when you don't have a road going to your place? Like, once a week, you can get out on a tractor trailer to town to get some shopping. But some people he's like, yeah, Putin really needs to take care of situation in Syria. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, do you see what you have in your own country? But that's how a lot of them is, for them, the great Russia is more important than my everyday life. Like, I can get by. It's okay. We need to show the world that we're still the mighty power,
Yeah, it's really interesting. Okay. So I got to say thank you again for doing this. This was this was a lot of fun, and I would definitely like to get you back on at some point.
Problem.
So let people know where they can find you in your show.
Sure. If you go on YouTube, I'm kind of being shadow banned by YouTube. So if you search anything like USSR, Soviet Union, my channel never shows up. I only guessing why. But USHANKA Show, so USHANKA, USHANKA Show, you'll find me. I also have an Instagram account, USHANKA_show. So yeah, if you guys interested in life in the Soviet Union, from my perspective, you're welcome to check it out and subscribe if you want.
Definitely do that. It's a real great channel. I've learned quite a bit, and it was definitely a real honor to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for making it to this part in the episode. Make sure to visit risetoliberty.store for all of our merch, and risetoliberty.com/free speech for the Telegram group for as long as that lasts. So Any parting words?
Just do your research. Don't believe into what if the two different things saying exactly the same words, those key points, you probably want to research deeper. So keep we call it critical thinking, question attitude, and we will succeed. And vote with your mind, not your emotions.
That's well put. All right, thanks, guys, and we'll catch you next episode. Hang
Thank
out
you.
for a minute, Sergei, and we'll get caught up on the back end. Stay
All
free,
right.
my friends.
Bye-bye.